Hey guys, my name is Iasmina and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do one of my favorite videos of the year. It's always super fun when I finally am able to do this video, and that is my most favorite books of the year. So this will be a rundown of all of my favorite books that I've read in 2020. These are not necessarily books that came out in 2020, although there are a couple of those, but it's just my favorite books that I've read in the year of our Dark Lord 2020. There will also be a companion video to this, and that'll be my least favorite books that I've read in 2020, which will be coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. Without much further ado, let's get into the books. These are in no particular order, so I'm not going to rank them by numbers. This is just going to be at random the most favorite books that I read this year. So, starting up with a literary fiction novel, this is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This was a very surprising book to me. I wasn't sure what to expect going into it because I had read the first pages of it a while back and it sounded like it would be really funny and relatable, but I had no idea what I was actually going into with this book. This is the story of Eleanor, who is very, very sick in a lot of different ways, and at the beginning of the book you don't really know why, you don't really know what happened to her, but we see her as she lives her life, and she lives a very solitary life. She likes her own company, which, again, that part was a bit relatable, and I could see a lot of people relating to that part of Eleanor, but then you kind of slowly start to figure out why she is the way she is, and we also follow her as she makes the first real relationship, it's actually a friendship, the first real friendship of her life, and slowly start to unravel her past. And yeah, this was pretty shocking in a lot of different ways. Totally recommend this. Just be aware that if you think it's gonna be like a really funny comedy kind of book, it's really not that. Next up we have The Witcher, or The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the first book in the Witcher series, although it is a short story collection, but most people say if you want to read the Witcher series you should start with this one, so that's what I did. Now, I have already posted a full book review of this book, spoiler free, so if you're interested in learning more about my thoughts on this book, I will link that up here. But of course this made it on to my favorites of 2020, but it was really good. I really like the main character. Of course, I have watched the show and have played the video game, so I was already really familiar with the story. The first season of the show kind of follows quite a bit of the events in this book in particular, so if you're familiar with the first season of The Witcher Netflix show, then you'll be familiar with some of the things that happen in this book. It was very fun, kind of whimsical fantasy, really deep in folklore, which I really like that kind of fantasy. And of course featuring one of my favorite characters of all time, Dandelion. I cannot make this video without mentioning the series that I fell in love with this year, because I read the second and third book, which was the finale of the Shadow of the Fox fantasy series. I have Soul of the Sword, which is the second book, and Night of the Dragon, which is the third and final book. So I read these two this year, and I read the first one the year prior, but this is now one of my favorite fantasy series. This is amazing. I've gushed about this series so much on this channel, and I have a full series review if you're curious to check that out. Again, spoiler free if you want to hear my thoughts on the series, but I would totally recommend this if you like Japanese inspired fantasy. Think of something that reads like an anime, something like Naruto or Inuyasha. I feel like this gives that kind of vibes, and I loved it. This is definitely, I'm not ranking any of these books, but this would be definitely at the top spots for this year. This book, the third book, came out in 2020. I think it came out around March, so this is one of the few books that actually did come out in 2020, not that I just read them in 2020. Another YA fantasy series that I started this year and that I absolutely loved, at least the first book of, is The Novice by Taran Matharu, and this is the first book in the Summoner series. Again, I have a book review up on my channel because I gushed about this book in that video, and again, I love this. I've been recommending this book all year. I think the magic system in this series is really cool. Imagine kind of like a Pokemon magic system where you basically have these demons that you can summon from an alternate dimension, and they become kind of your weapon but also your companion. And our main character Fletcher at the beginning of the book finds out that he can summon this demon, and then he goes to school to learn the wonders of being a summoner, and it was fantastic. If you liked Harry Potter and you want something similar to Harry Potter but not Harry Potter, read this. Yeah, I think it's a great start to a YA fantasy series, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the series as well next year. Next up, we have a contemporary novel, and that is This Adventure Ends by Emma Mills. Now, this was my first Emma Mills book. I've been wanting to read her books for a very long time, because if you didn't know, she is one of like the OG YouTubers. She used to make videos all the way back in the day on her channel Elmify, and I've been following her for years, literally since I pretty much started watching YouTube. I think she was already making videos, and at some point she started coming out with books. This one was the one that appealed to me the most out of the books that she has written so far. And yeah, I mean, I loved this. This was exactly my kind of contemporary book. It's very friendship based. There's not really any romantic interest. It's more about friendships and a good squad, and I love me a good squad. It also followed like a mini adventure that these characters are going on, and the main character was also really interesting and relatable in a lot of ways. So this was just like a perfect YA contemporary, the kind of stuff that I really like to read every once in a while. So if you're into that, I would totally recommend this. Another contemporary book, and that is Love Boat Taipei by Abigail Hing Wen. So I read this around summer. It also came out around summer. This is another actual 2020 release, and I really enjoyed this. This was the perfect kind of escapism YA contemporary novel. The main character in this book is traveling to Taiwan to attend a summer educational program called the Love Boat, and she goes there expecting, you know, a very strict educational program, but actually Love Boat is kind of a party scene. So again, we get to see Ever making new friends at this Love Boat, and also accepting the fact that the dreams that she wants to pursue are not the same as her parents, and she has to reconcile with that fact and reconcile with her parents. Next up is another book I've talked about a lot on my channel already, and that is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Now this again is one that could definitely be at the top of my favorites of this year, because I really love this. Again, I have a full spoiler-free review of this book if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts. But yeah, I mean, Robin Hobb, you just cannot go wrong with Robin Hobb. She is such an amazing writer. This is an amazing epic fantasy book following the Vestrit family, who own a live ship. And what a live ship is a ship that comes to life after 3 generations of the same family have died on board its deck, and this is what happens at the beginning of this book. And so we follow this family as they are trying to handle this live ship, and mostly the 2 children, the point of view of the children of this family that are also coming into their teens, and so we get to follow their growing up stories as well. And yeah, I gush about this book a lot, so I'm not gonna say any more now, but watch my video if you're curious to learn more about Ship of Magic. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about are both books I read on audio, and they're by the same author, and that is At Home and The Body by Bill Bryson. I had to mention these in this video because I read both of them this year, and I really loved them. I listened to them so fast, and I loved every second of those audiobooks. Now, these are 2 non-fiction books, and I think actually the only non-fiction books in this video, but again, I had to talk about them because I really love them, and Bill Bryson is now one of my favorite non-fiction authors. I talk about both of them in my favorite non-fiction books video that I will link up here if you want to learn more, but basically At Home follows the history of the home and what homes used to look like thousands of years ago and what they look like now, and how different rooms and different things in the house came to be the way we know them today. So think of how the bedroom came to be, the room with a bed where we go to sleep, how salt shakers and pepper shakers came to be, a lot of really random but wonderful things. And he goes into a lot of really interesting tangents to the point where I had to Google a lot of the things that he was talking about because I wanted to learn more. And then The Body is a medical nonfiction that looks at the body and everything we know about it to this day. This also came out in 2020, so it is a recent release. And I loved it. Bill Bryson writes with a lot of humor. He also narrates his own audiobooks, most of them, at least these 2. So they're just a really wonderful listening experience, and if you're curious about Bill Bryson or want to try some audiobooks, I highly recommend both of these. Okay, next up is The Selection by Kira Cass, a very surprising book that I wouldn't have thought that it would make it to this video, but I devoured this in like a day or 2, which is really fast for me, and yeah, I really like this. I like this a lot more than I thought I would. But The Selection is kind of a dystopian YA in which the selection takes place, and the selection is kind of a The Bachelor sort of competition, and the main character takes part in the selection to win the prince's heart, but really she is only in it for the money. I really enjoyed the main character in this, and I actually really enjoyed the kind of courting that goes on between her and the prince. And I also really like the concept. I think it could have been expanded on a lot more, but I haven't read the rest of the series, but maybe that happens in the rest of the series. So anyway, it definitely made it on to my favorite books of 2020. Next up, we have Kim Ji-young, born in 1982 by Cho Nam-ju. And this is a very strange book, but the more I thought about it, the more I had to include it in this video because it really left me with a lot to think about after I finished reading it. It is quite a short book, so it's also one that you could read really fast. It holds a lot of important things in it, I think, and I think really everyone should read this book. So this follows our main character called Kim Ji-young, who is supposed to represent all women born in South Korea around the 80s and 90s, growing up in the 90s, and all the sort of things that they had to go through. Definitely a feminist story, so if you're interested in the topic and you're interested to see this perspective from a South Korean woman, I definitely recommend this. Next up is a very different book. This is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now, I read this around Halloween time and I made an entire video about only reading scary books during October, which I will link up in the cards and down in the description. If you're interested, please go watch that because I read a lot of kind of spooky horror books during that time, and this was one of them, and this was one of my favorites that I read that month. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. This was a really awesome book. This is about two best friends in the 80s, and as the title suggests, one of them gets possessed and it's up to the other one to save her friend. This was packed full of like 80s references, like the titles of each of the chapters are songs that came out in the 80s. It definitely made me feel nostalgic about like the 80s and early 90s, even though, I mean, I wasn't born in the 80s, I was born in the early 90s. But it still made me feel a bit nostalgic, if that makes sense. Future me interrupting here because I totally forgot a book, and this always happens, but I just thought I should insert it here. That book is The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, which, again, I was actually surprised how much I loved it. This is a part of the Magisterium series, and I think there's 5 books in the series, and again, this is supposed to be kind of a Harry Potter-esque YA fantasy series. In a similar way to The Novice by Taran Matharu, I really love this. I think it is definitely a very good alternative to Harry Potter if you don't want to read Harry Potter or you want something similar to Harry Potter. I really love the characters in this. I don't think the magic system is that great, but I think the characters is what shines in this, and I also think the humor, like it's written with quite a bit of humor, which I really like in this kind of story. There's some twists to the usual kind of chosen one tropes in this, which I'm not going to spoil, but I think it's done really well. And just altogether, we're super enjoyable, really quick to get through, and I would highly recommend this. Next up is probably my favorite YA contemporary novel that I've read this year out of all of the contemporary novels, and that is I Was Born for This by Alice Osman. I love this book so much. Again, I have a spoiler-free review up on my channel, which you can watch if you so wish. But this is a beautiful story about fandom and what it's like to be a fan. At the beginning of the book, the main character meets her online best friend who she's never met before in real life because they're about to embark on a weekend of being engrossed in their favorite band. They're going to a concert and a meet and greet, and they're just like fangirling all over the place, and it's a wonderful look at fandom culture. It does it in a way that is very realistic. As someone who is a part of some fandoms, fandom culture can definitely sometimes be portrayed in a negative way, but this book does it in a very realistic way and shows both the good and the bad parts. If there's one YA contemporary book from this video that you can pick up, I would highly recommend this one. Next up, another contemporary novel, and that is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This is a tiny book that again was very relatable and kind of left me with quite a bit to think about. This portrays mental health and grief in, again, a very realistic way. And I just think in general it was a very beautifully written book about grief. which of course that is a subject that is not easy to write about. I think the way this was done was really, really nice. So if you're interested in that kind of topic and a book that is diverse in its mental health representation and identity representation, I think this one is definitely one you should check out. And again, it's very short, you can read it very quickly. Second to last book in this video is The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. This is another one that I read during October, and you can find out more in my reading vlog of that month. But again, this was one that really surprised me. This is definitely one of my favorite books of the year. This is if Stranger Things were a book, pretty much. I am a big fan of Stranger Things, the TV show, and this was the closest thing I have found since the show. Like, it's different enough from Stranger Things that it's its own story, but it definitely had a lot of the elements of Stranger Things that I personally really, really love. So it's about the small town in America that has a dark past, and the founders of this town have magical abilities, and there was a monster that started attacking this town, and these founders of the town have imprisoned the monster in the Grey. Think of the Grey as the upside down in Stranger Things. But the monster starts escaping when the main character moves back to this town. She is the daughter of one of these founders, but she has no idea of what's happened in this town and what awaits her when she moves back. Really creepy, really awesome. It's a duology, so there's only one more book in the series, and I really, really want to get my hands on that next year because this is awesome. And if you can read it around Halloween time, this is perfect. Alright, and finally, the last book in this video is one I haven't finished. I'm not even halfway through, but I can already tell that this has to be in this video because it is one of my favorite series, and I have been meaning to get to this book for a very, very long time. It just hasn't happened. But anyway, the last book in this video, it has to be Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said, I am only about 200 and something pages into this book, so you know. But I mean, I already love it. It's Brandon Sanderson. I really much doubt that there's anything in this book that will make it drop out of my favorite reads of 2020 because I adore everything that, first of all, that Sanderson writes, and the Stormlight Archive is one of my top favorite fantasy series. It has to be in this video, even though I haven't finished it. So, you know, disclaimer, I haven't finished it. Please don't spoil me with things that happen in this book because I am filming this around the end of December, and so there's still time that I can finish it this year, but since it is such a huge book, it'll probably take me a little bit of the first month of next year as well to finish it, but I just had to mention it in this video because it is Sanderson, Stormlight Archive. What's not to love? Alright! So those were my favorite reads of 2020. There were quite a lot of them. I think Goodreads says I read about 37 books this year, and these are 17? Yeah, I think 17, if my calculations are correct. So 17 books of the 37 that I considered my top books of the year, which is quite a bit, honestly. And it was pretty hard for me to narrow them down more than this because even though I didn't give all of these books 5 stars, a lot of these are 4 and maybe even 3 stars. Star rating doesn't matter that much. I can still really enjoy a book and still give it 3 stars. And it can still make it onto my favorites list. Do let me know what were your favorite books that you read in 2020 or book releases that came out in 2020. This year was a hot mess, and one of my coping mechanisms was definitely to read and buy books, and so this is kind of, you know, a look into how I survived 2020, and I hope that your 2020 was decent. I'm not gonna say good because how good can it really have been? And like I said, there will also be a least favorite reads of 2020 from me either next week or the week after that. But that was it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in any of the books that I've shown in this video, you will find links to them down below, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. But otherwise, I will see you next time with a new video. Bye!